principle of illusion and its role in the evolutionary process for us. Illusion, non-truth, and its role in the evolutionary process for us is a very interesting thing. It's very interesting. And so we talked a little bit yesterday about how, you can bring souls to earth in human form. This ancient Vedic story from the Vedas, that there were two groups of humans that lived on the earth. And the first group came in and just valued and appreciated that human physiology, nervous system so much, that the bridge between the silence of being and the source of creation. So they were just like, oh, well, we're just using these physiologies to get enlightened. And they didn't really engage a lot with the material level of creation. And as a result, that race didn't continue. There was kind of a loss right there. Oh, they liked their bodies so much that they didn't allow them to continue. So what happens? If you go to a cave, you say, oh, I've got a human body. Great. I'm just going to go sit in a cave until I get enlightened and die. And so, so like if everybody does that. So what happens is the enlightenment process happens fairly quickly. It happens within the course of a lifetime. Or maybe they were lucky enough that there was a few generations came and went in there. Well, if you get enlightened in one lifetime, you get to see a certain amount of, you get to directly experience and integrate a certain amount of detail of that process. But if you take multiple lifetimes or generations, multiple generations to get enlightened, then you appreciate deeper, much more deeply, the mechanics of that process. So the second group that came would be this group that we're in right now. And it's slowed down just enough. There's enough crudeness. What happened was the physiologies had to be made with just a little bit more crudeness in them than those other physiologies. They were just a little bit too refined, the other ones. So this was just a little more crude. And as I see the very big transformation that we're going through right now globally is one of trying to move the meter ever so slightly up the frequency value, so that our nervous systems actually, so we're actually transforming our nervous systems through our direct experience of being humans to be a little bit more on the refined side of like fine tuning. We're fine tuning the nervous system to be just a little bit, enough more refined that we can eliminate some of the major catastrophic aspects of being human. And I mean, it's happened the other way too. See, I suspect it's happened the other way because there was a time, for example, when Mars was habitable. There was a time when Mars was habitable. And there are stories about things not going well for Mars. There's also the asteroid belt that's just outside of Mars. That's could very possibly, I don't know. Do you know? Do you know if the scientists, they don't know, do they? It could have been a planet that also, like, the souls were just a little bit too much on the crude side and they destroyed. We don't know. We could look, we can suspect, we can have our suspicions, and then going back that far into the histories, back billions of years in the history of the formation of our solar system, there's a lot of virtual realities that sort of start to surface. So a lot of layers of what actually happened. There's a history right there in the Akashic record. I see, well, those were some big transitions, right? Like it was a really big transition for Earth when the moon, when Theia, I think it was called Theia, was another planet that had formed in the same belt going around the sun. And so there was like a larger planet, and then there was Theia was like the smaller planet. And at some point, obviously one of them was going to move more quickly than the others, right? And these are planetoids. And so what happened is there was a crash. That was a big transition for Earth. Some big transitions right there. Just sort of, I guess we're taking a moment here at the beginning of our webinar, just sort of like quietly honor some of the cosmic transitions that have occurred before we got here, just to kind of put everything in perspective. Thank you for bearing with me through that geological history of the solar system. Yeah, that was really something special. Okay, love you guys. I didn't see that one coming. Big transitions, of course, are harder if we don't see them coming. So one of the main purposes of today's webinar is to take a look at what's going on in a much shorter time frame and what's actually coming. And what I'm seeing is that as a collective, we are attempting to do a fine tuning on moving the needle of the refinement of the human physiology. We don't want to become so refined as that first group that we just go, sit in caves and do nothing more with ourselves than just go straight for a very fast path to enlightenment. We want to make the path needs to be slow enough that there's a sense of like deep, yummy satisfaction about the speed at which we are navigating the evolutionary process. There's a feeling of like just the best, just the best. And that balance point, that quality or that feeling of like, for example, right now, my husband and I are working on a painting together, which just happens that we're doing that occasionally, a little bit of time when we're not just working nose to the grindstone all the time. So we're working on this painting together. And I said to him, I want the areas of color to interact together like they're nestled, like they're hugging each other, like they're nestled. So the painting has this feeling of like, oh, like a baby melting on your shoulders, like just such a sweet feeling. I want that feeling in that painting. And but at the same time, we're playing a lot of symphonies, a lot of Beethoven and Mozart. I've been studying Mozart. So we're playing these symphonies, and I realized that I found a groove for the shapes of the color sections in this painting. And I realized that by finding this theme, it's like Mozart always starts with a simple theme. It's a very innocent, beautiful theme. It's just and like in the painting, this kind of the theme would be this shape like this, but then how Mozart does it. He takes the gaps between the shapes and pulls out of the gap all the detail, all the elaboration of what is actually the connection between that physical material form and wholeness. And so I realized that the painting is thus becoming a kind of symphony. In a way, it's becoming a symphony because it's the same mechanic that's occurring in the painting with regards to simple shapes and colors. Like when we think of his constructions, there's a sort of beautiful innocence in the way he puts little melodies to, it's such a simple, da, 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 just simple little connections of sound values, but they end up becoming the foundation for this total elaborate, amazing. So how did I just derail myself? Yes. So the theme of our webinar, everything is like that. Everything is like that. There's a kind of, at the deep level, and yesterday I talked about this is the whole principle of energy healing, hence the painting of the ocean behind me, that in the gap is where all energy healing actually occurs. We move consciousness in the gap. And there's a kind of innocence and simplicity when awareness is very close to the source of creation. Oh, and it was that yummy feeling, right? The yumminess of it coming in as a download for everyone. That's why I had to elaborate it a little bit. Thank you for understanding how this works, how this process works. We elaborate. This is very subtle. It's very innocent. It's very like, there's like a level. That's what we're giving. I was thinking today, yes, we need to leverage our group consciousness here to really create some kind of major transformation out into the collective. So what we're doing here as a group right now is we're coordinating ourselves to shine each of us from our perspective light on this particular sort of yummy form. I'm using the word yummy for lack of a better word, but think of a pile of kittens, right? That are all kind of like nesting on top of each other, something like that. Just something so soft and so well coordinated and yet so lovely and adorable, etc. And that this feeling is a piece, it's like a little concentrated abstract package of information that needs to be communicated to the collective field of humanity in order for the collective field of humanity to know like precisely where that dial needs to shift to, how it needs to shift. Because the thing is that it's such a fine tuning. I used the example of tuning a violin yesterday because you've got the major knobs at the end of the violin. I suddenly can't remember their name, but anyway, the knobs at the end of the violin that kind of tune the string approximately, but then you've got the little tiny little tuning knobs at the top that allow you to go in like precisionally and just tune that string up to its exact, very, very exact number of cycles per second that the musician's ear can hear that. And so we're kind of like musicians or artists, right? That we're understanding, we're looking at what's happening out in the collective consciousness. Like how many people on earth right now are able to put the transition that we're going through into perspective? Maybe some, and maybe everyone to a certain degree. But what we're able to do as a collective is we're able to shine our light each from our different point of perspective so that we're able to provide a really bright illumination of what this collective transformation that's taking place right now, like what actually that is and where it needs to go. And then to define how to, just like the musician's ear can hear, when that note comes into tune. When it comes into tune, there's this satisfying feeling, right? It's the same thing that we know this because of the events in Eastern Europe, whose names I will not mention. But we know that particular situation has shined a light on the potential of humanity at this time to possibly spiral out into some kind of very large scale, very negative event for our whole world. So we don't want to do that, right? So what we're doing is we're thinking, okay, like this is it. That was the catalyst. That was the sign that the events in Eastern Europe was the message being sent to the whole world consciousness that, oh, this means it's time to move the dial. Now we've come to the dial moving moment. And so what we're doing as our healing collective is we're positioning ourselves to support the moving of that dial in such a way that like the master musician, right? Like the great musician, Beethoven, we love so much Beethoven, even he was going deaf, he could stop and tell a particular instrumentalist that a particular note that they played was too flat or too sharp, because he was hearing with his ears some, but he was really hearing with the energetic structure of his being. Why certain individuals end up standing out, they end up coming to the top of the Pareto distribution. They end up coming to like the top of the pile of famous composers or whatever, because they were diving into that level, that degree of accuracy and precision. So as we do that, we actually restructure ourselves. We redefine ourselves in terms of this higher level of precision energetically. This is why we're doing this together in the energy healing webinar. Thank you for being the ones who have the vision, appreciation, and wisdom to be here to do this. God bless you. I can't do it without you. All right. So the measure of where the dial needs to move, of just how to adjust that tiny little knob at the tuning knob at the top of the violin, is measured on this feeling, or you could say direct energetic experience of yumminess, like a kind of softness. We look through the history of humanity up to this point, and this is a little bit still review yesterday. There is no time in our history where there hasn't at least been a standing army. Even in Sat Yuga, even stories, ancient Vedic stories from Sat Yuga, there still were standing armies, which means that there's been war. There's been war. And of course, that's okay, I guess. Like, that's the way the history has unfolded. So it's not like, who am I to say that those wars were not supposed to happen? They were bringing karma and all kinds of unfolding of all kinds of evolution for everybody. But at this time in history, We have the technological capability to utterly obliterate life on Earth, and therefore that would be like definitely not a good thing to do. So that's the mark of the tipping point for the transformation. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to everybody. So I feel like a kind of energy, it's sort of almost like a spiraling or swirling energy in our webinar collective. It's kind of gathering up this energy signature of a feeling of like kind of deep satisfaction. I was using the word yummy, but we can use the word deep satisfaction as well. And we're all shining our light from our own perspectives on this thing. And the principle here is you shine the light delicately and then release awareness back to wholeness. Because if we shine the light and go, oh, that's nice, I want to bring it out to the surface, then y'all would be just like shutting off your computer right now and go make a painting or play some beautiful music from some great composer or something. And we want to actually direct, we want this piece of this package of information to be directed to the collective field. So we can't be too attached to it. Don't worry, you still own it. You'll still get to live it. You still get to like navigate through its expression in your life and in the field of our world. But just for right now, we have to do the mechanic with it. We have to do the energy healing mechanic, which is the yumminess is there. And then awareness is just, we hold space in silence, in the silence of being. The yumminess is there. We hold space in the silence of being. And we just, from the silence, there's like a little back and forth between the yumminess and the silence, and the yumminess and the silence, back and forth, very just, the more gently, the more delicately you can experience this, the more powerful the effect will be. One of the things I'm seeing in our group is that this is causing an activation of refinement and healing in the abdominal area of the body. Good. So all the gut back, what that means, what that tells me is that y'all's gut bacteria are like on board. Our biomes are on board. That this isn't just about handling our situation from a political or societal level, but also handling it in terms of our relationship with our microbial world. Our microbial world is on board with us. That's the important point. The microbial world is on board and supporting. Oh, and I see why. Because the evolution of the microbiome in our bodies interfaces with the nervous system. Why? Because our microbiome, all our lovely little gut bacteria, of which there are many, they produce the same spectrum of neurochemicals as our bodies produce. So they produce hormones and enzymes and neuropeptides and proteins and all kinds of other wonderful materials, proteins especially, right? That ionized proteins, right? We talked about that yesterday, the epigenome, and I've been talking about the epigenome for a while since one of you all wonderful people sent me those videos about the epigenome and the latest research in that field. But the point is that it is the onboarding of our microbiome that is plays a key role in the physiological refinement of the nervous system. Oh, boom. Well, that's interesting. And what's really beautiful about it, you guys, is it's like the cavalry are coming. It's like our heroes are to the rescue. That, yes, as individuals, we had to sort of We had to adjust ourselves around into this position where our consciousness created a context that would send the right messages in the right direction. I thought, silly me, I thought we were creating this yummy feeling that we were sending it out to the collective consciousness via the Schumann resonance and all the values and all the ways that we as a collective we as a small energy healing collective heal the big collective of humanity, which we are. But what I didn't see coming was that it would also reflect into the very small beings of our world, all of our little, tiny organisms of our world were also going to be influenced and affected by this in a really significant way that basically puts our little healing, positions us as a small healing collective in the center between the large collective of all of humanity versus the microbial reality of our earth, like that. Between the two we're sandwiched. We get to be the bridge, which is a lovely position to be. It's a power position for sure. We get to be that bridge. Now we hold the silence and the yumminess and the silence and the yumminess. We come back, we cycle back in. We cycle back into that spot. Right, I'm checking everybody's abdomens. Don't mind me. Like a midwife palpating where the baby is. Oh, there's a baby, there's a head. Heads and feet. This is such a beautiful upgrade for the digestion. It's such a beautiful upgrade for the microbial reality of the physiology. It's going to make our ability to digest food really good. There was something that was coming in yesterday. We did a healing yesterday for bones and joints and so forth. And one of the solutions that the body produced was the ability to produce more human growth hormone. Just not overproduce, but just the exact perfect amount of human growth hormone that creates this feeling of robustness in the body. And I think that was a prerequisite for this, because when all the tissues and all the organs of the digestive system then rise up into this level of being more efficient and digesting food in a more thorough and healthful manner, then the next result is that the microbiome is also there benefiting. And there's a lot of back and forth. I'm just feeling a lot of back and forth between individual body, microbiome, and then also out to the collective. And by holding your awareness, by allowing your awareness gently, easing in, gently just enjoying that silence. And this process, we all become, as a collective, our webinar collective, an open channel of healing flow for the whole world. The people and all of the microorganisms and everything in between. It's like a great, huge blessing of grace from the divine is like going, oh, look, there's a mechanism there. I can activate it to produce this effect for myself, which I need to produce right now. It's like those first humans coming and going, oh, human nervous system. Well, quick, let's just get enlightened right now. The divine is doing the same thing. It's like, oh, look at this little collective. They've so got it. They're so on. So we just open up. Can you feel like a channel? We're just a channel. It's just a flow from that silence. From the silence, and it's a flow that's communicating that yummy feeling, that just every single note was in the right place and it was perfectly in tune, or every single color section was just the right shape and just the right proportion and tone and color, just perfect. The interactions, it's like, oof, yes, that feeling. Back to the silence. Back to the silence. From the silence, you witness its flow. And the flow is like, it's tingling as it goes into the collective field. It's tingling as it runs through the physiology. But you witness, we don't not gripped, just like in the silence of being, beyond it all, above and beyond it all. And just enjoying from that level, all the resources required to allow that energy to perpetuate as to its optimal expression are available. If we get too gripped in it, then we block the flow of the resources. Very nice. I'm seeing lots of nice heart activation going on too. It's very nice. So all of us becoming a little more and more, using our own physiologies like a tuning fork to produce the resonations that the collective consciousness needs in order to make the shift. And so part of that story is more empathetic, more ability to be empathetic, but in a way that's very discriminating. This is activating for all of us. All of us are sort of in the groove of that. We're in the flow of that. Discriminative empathy. That lets everybody grow in. It's the discrimination that allows everybody to grow into their full potential. The empathy is wonderful, and that's necessary, and that's part of the shifting the dial over a little bit. So like maybe we don't do war. How about that? How about that great idea? How about let's don't do war? But at the same stroke, that it has to, that discrimination element has to be there, because if we're too overly helpful and enabling people to not evolve, then that's also not good. There has to be enough diversity. There has to be enough illusion. There's a long talk yesterday about illusion. Oh, and I see questions coming in here too on that account. I really need to get to questions pretty quick here, but enough illusion that the enlightenment process moves with a kind of perfection through the individual life and the collective life, so that we as beings in this universe are able to continue, that we are able to continue and fulfill our destiny, you could say, or fulfill the reason for which we've come into this creation in the first place, which is to be the anchor or vehicle by which wholeness, the one, knows itself. You are doing it. We are doing it. Super beautiful. It's just a part of me is sort of bowing down and honoring that process. It continues, and it will continue as I continue to read questions. So let's go to one from last night that I didn't quite get to. I love the way this lady writes, and I love the way she thinks she's got another one over here about illusion too. So I'm looking forward to checking these out. There are definitely large transformations happening in the world. Around me, I am seeing small but expansive changes that I think will accumulate into something significant and currently unimagined in the future. I definitely agree. I mean, part of what's fueling the transformation is also evolution of technology. And, you know, we know that we're coming up, and we can actually look at the curve, and we're coming up very, very quickly to a level of technological capabilities that are going to solve a lot of the world's problems. Like a lot of things that have been bothering people are going to be taken care of really quickly here, I think, in the very near future. So yeah, it feels like we are preparing, but not quite ready for a very large change. Can we have a healing to help prepare for big transformation coming? Yeah, the part that feels like we're preparing but not quite ready has to do with the fact that a transformation like this is always going to involve some surprises. And there's certain surprises you just can't get ready for. It's like through the history of humanity, we as a race perpetuate ourselves by producing offspring. But when a young couple who've never had a baby before get pregnant, they can just prepare so much. They can read everything that's out there on the internet, and they can get the books, and they can buy the fancy pants changing tables and all that. And yet they can never prepare themselves, really. They really can't, because the experience of being a parent is just indescribable. It's so danged hard. And the hard part is over the hard part that stretches you beyond all limits that you have reached up to that point in your life is completely superseded by the level of blessing that being a parent is. So it's just like one overwhelm with another overwhelm on top of it. And it's like, you can't prepare for that. You just can't. And I mean, collectively, we're kind of in a similar situation here, where we're going through a change that we've been building up to as a race of beings for a really, really long time. I mean, honestly, if we can navigate this effectively, we could conceivably come into a time where our technology is so high that, you know, a lot of like the illnesses and problems that have plagued humans for ages upon ages will not be a problem for us anymore. And in the same stroke, there might not be war either, which would be amazing. It would be absolutely wonderful. And at the same time, we have to also create kind of a balance, right? If we don't move the dial a little bit, and people are a little bit more on the cruder side of the dial, then you get a lot of degenerate behavior when the dial is more on the crude side. And the degenerate behavior gives rise to situations where people aren't thinking before they reproduce and things like that, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I'm not just going to focus, it's not just that one issue, but there are other issues too, obviously, of course. But the point is that we're smart and we can create a context that will be divinely inspired. And it has to have that yumminess as part of the story, that, you know, it's like that feeling when you know it's right. When you know it's right, that's that feeling. Maybe yummy was the wrong word. The feeling of, you know, it's right. You just know it. You know it down to your soul. You know it in your gut. Oh, because your microbiome's there going, yeah, yeah, hey, holding up his flag. All 370 trillion of them, yeah. Anyway, you get the idea.